And we are live, everyone. Welcome to another show of the Balance and Empathy Show. I'm Tisha from the Netherlands, and I'm together here with the amazing Rina from Australia and Ashok from Canada. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is future empathy. Now, for all of our viewers, if you are watching, please let us know in the comments where are you watching from, because we want to know where you are based and who is watching us. We're so curious. So please let us know. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and then we can show them on the screen and we do our best to answer your questions. So we were talking about this topic in preparation to the show today. And I was telling Ashok and Rina, future empathy really reminds me of something that's often asked in podcasts, right? What would be your advice to your younger self? But today we're flipping that because we're going to talk about future empathy. And that's actually what would your future self tell you today? And Ashok has an interesting story about this. So Ashok, over to you. Maybe you did a post about this topic the other day, and maybe you can share that story with our viewers.
Well, I've actually done a couple of posts about future empathy, and future empathy is something I've been thinking about really probably for most of my life. And let's first of all talk about what empathy is. And empathy is the capacity to understand and try to experience the thoughts and feelings and inner self of somebody else from their point of view, not your point of view. And so empathy is not being yourself in somebody else's shoes, because that's still you. It's about being somebody else in their shoes. And that's actually very hard to do because it requires a certain level of self-negation. And what I mean by that is that your belief about what that person is experiencing might contaminate what they actually are. So when people are empathizing with somebody else, they might say, I know exactly what you're going through because the same thing happened to me. That might be true, but it might not be true. And the empathy starts when you actually ask the person, how's your experience different? Now, this whole thing gets a lot more complicated when we're talking about self-empathy, which means thinking about yourself, usually in the past. How did I feel? And in therapy, a lot of times, we ask people to go back and have a different perception on a previous time in their life when they felt younger. And when we are experiencing something in a situation over time, we get very saturated with how we feel about it. And so what I started thinking about is, well, how many times have we told ourselves, if I knew what I knew now, I would have behaved differently then, which means in the past. And experience and time and wisdom often allows us to have a different perspective on ourselves. So then I started thinking, well, why not flip this and use our future self that has not yet happened to look back at our present self and say, well, what would I do if I had more confidence? What would I do if I felt better about myself? What would I do if I had lost that 10 pounds? What would I do if I had more knowledge? What would I do if I felt better about myself? What would I do if I loved myself in my future? Now, the post that I posted recently, and I'll finish very soon because I want to hear everybody else's points, was that when I was a child, I had a very crippling disease. And that crippling disease, it happened between the ages of 6 and 8. I had to wear all this machinery on my legs and have a platform on my foot. And essentially, I couldn't do anything that required running or moving around. So at that time, I was a little boy, of course. All my friends were playing soccer. And the results of that, I had to not play with my friends and play soccer. I ended up playing with all the girls, which ended up being fabulous because I learned so much about empathy and how to interact socially by playing with the girls. But the other thing I didn't know when I had all that machinery on my legs is what I would do in the future. That I would learn to do karate, that I would be a ballet dancer, that I would be even an aerobics instructor, and I would be a cyclist and a swimmer and a runner, and all these things. And so I think, wouldn't it be interesting if that little boy could have listened to his future self and said, it's all right. This is all going to be over at some point, because kids can't read time. But when you're finished with this, look at all these amazing things you're going to do. That might have changed my sensibility or my experience of being in that situation at that time, so that I would have had more hope. I'll leave it there.
That's very amazing, Ashok. And I think we can all relate when we look back at our younger self, as opposed to who we are today and what we have accomplished. Then we would say to our younger self, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And so that's perfect. Why not flip that to the future? Because we can replicate that exact manner, right, to our future self and say, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And then embrace opportunities with much more confidence. What do you think, Rena?
Absolutely spot on. And, when you talk about hope, I loved your post, by the way. It really resonated with me, Ashok. Congratulations. And you had 2 parts to that post. So it was really, really wonderful. But from my perspective, you talked about thoughts and feelings. For me, it's really about the conscious mind. And looking at, in terms of my future self, what I would do is I'd focus more on my mind and consciousness and purify my mind, because, as you say, you talk about contamination and how that past experience has such an impact. For example, there's so many people that have bad relationships or bad marriages. And, do you walk away from that saying, oh, I'm never going to get married again, or I'm never going to fall in love again? So these are key things that we really need to think about as human beings. And going back to your question there, what would I do? I think it's so important to ensure that you cultivate your mind, you've got the right thoughts, you're surrounding yourself with the right people in your life, those who are going to bring out the best in you. And that's so important. And I'd like to just say hello to everyone around the world for joining us today. It's wonderful to see you all. Please be a part of this conversation, and we look forward to all your questions. Over to you, Tisha.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rena. And I love what you said about relationships. And that's exactly it, right? So if you have a bad experience, but then again, you find love and it's going to be okay, then looking back, what would have happened if you would have that bad experience determine the rest of your life, right? And I think no one wants that. What we all want is to have the confidence and the ability to embrace that new opportunity, instead of looking back and then the past is determining your future, and you don't want that. So that's so well said. Now for the audience, please let us know your comments. If you have any questions about this topic, future empathy, which is so interesting, please put them in the comments. We have people watching from all over the world. I'm showing it in the comments, and it's just so amazing to see Tunisia, California, India, Dubai. So hello everyone. Put your questions and comments in the chat section, and then we will show them on the screen and answer your questions to our best abilities. Now, instead of only like relate.
Sorry, Tisha. I was just going to say, just while we're waiting for the questions to come in, it'd be great to get Ashok just to elaborate a little bit more on the statement that he made in his post, that burnout is a breakdown in future empathy. Can you talk a little more to that, Ashok?
Wow, that's a testy one. People have trouble talking about burnout until they're burnt out. And I've been burnt out 3 times in my career, in med school, and then a couple of times going along. And so I'm okay. Don't worry about me. But the problem with burnout is that you get so locked in the moment that you're in, you stop looking forward. You stop thinking, I'll get out of this. And so you just keep going. It's a little bit like getting lost in your car before we had GPS. And you just keep driving with the vague hope that you're going to find something. So certain conditions rob us of the capacity to look to our future. This happens in post-traumatic stress disorder, where people just feel they're going to feel that way all the time. They can't look forward into their future. And burnout really is a form of a stress disorder. Instead of it being a big thing, it's lots of little tiny things constantly accumulating, like a chronically toxic workplace. That isn't so bad that you have PTSD from it, but you have burnout. And what happens when you have burnout is that you stop your sense of looking at in your future gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think the capacity to project yourself into your future is the basis of confidence, as Tisha said earlier. Self-esteem is the accumulation of all the things you've already done. And that means you know that I've done this, so I know I can do that again. Confidence is the capacity to believe in what you can do with that self-esteem. So a lot of people, when we talk about confidence, it is different. It's looking forward as opposed to backwards, which is self-esteem. And if you think of self-esteem as your savings account in the bank that hopefully should keep going up, your confidence is much more like your checking account that goes up and down and deals with the outside world. And confidence from a statistical point of view is simply believing in the chances of a positive outcome. So future empathy, I think, is believing in the chance of a positive outcome in yourself, in your future. And with burnout, to go back to your beautiful question, Rena, burnout people stop thinking that there's going to be a positive outcome. They get swamped and they get ashamed. And so they stop thinking that there can be a way to get out of this. And so they stay and they stay and stay until something snaps in their life somewhere.
Beautifully said, Ashok. Thank you so much. Now we have a question, and I'm sorry, LinkedIn user. I think that's because we're not connected on LinkedIn that I don't see your name, so apologies. A question: how can a manager handle empathy feelings of a team? Rena, being in the corporate sector, a lot of time on your work week, how do you do that in your team?
It's all about understanding and taking the time, Tisha, to actually listen to people in your team. So you understand the thought process, what's going on in their minds. There might be deep-rooted reasons for the way that they're positioning and the way that they are behaving. So from a manager's perspective, you just really need to take that time to listen to exactly what they're saying to you so that you can help come up with the solutions. And if there's no alignment with the company culture or what you're trying to achieve in that team environment, then it's important to explain to the person, take the time to explain to the person your point of view, why it's not fitting in, why there's no synergy, what are the reasons from your perspective, understand their perspective, and then try and match the two together. It might not happen at that point in time, but you could give a time frame to the person. You could say, in 3 months, let's see what the improvements are. And then you need to explain to them how you will evaluate that improvement so that they need to realise that you are going to jointly collaborate and measure the outcome. That's the only way for success in a team environment, I believe.
Fantastic, Rena. I totally agree. And I think it's what you said. It's also about finding the common ground within a team and working towards those joint goals together. We have another question coming in from Kulut Ben Sala. He says, what are the proper steps to be followed in order to avoid thinking about bad experience? Now, in my experience, it's really focusing on the positive things that helps me, and I know it helps others too. Focusing on the things that work, focusing on the things that give you positive energy, because that will really help you to avoid keep thinking about bad experiences. I think it's really important you deal with that bad experience, but you don't need to keep dwelling on it like too long. At some point, as Ashok said, with burnout, you need to be able to look into the future again and to be able to move on And positive things in your life will help you a lot with that. Ashok, do you have something to elaborate on that? I'm sure. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's a beautiful question, but we have to realize that an experience is the objective thing that happened, i.e., it's raining outside, and the subjective experience is it's terrible. It's raining outside because now I can't play outside, or it's raining outside and I'm going to be growing flowers and plants and my trees are going to be good, or maybe I have a game I play out in the rain. I get to wear my new umbrella, my new Macintosh, which is a type of raincoat. So what we can do about a bad experience is look at what we are bringing to that experience that makes it feel bad to us, as opposed to what the actual experience is or what somebody else is doing. And the person you're most likely to change is yourself. And what you can change is your attitude or your sensibility. And I'm sure Rena will tell us about this in meditation, to be able to cleanse our mind and create that clear space again in our head, so that the next moment that happens after that bad experience can be a good one again.
I absolutely agree, Ashok. And, the thing is, a bad experience just makes us a better person. Because as you say, it gives us that time to reflect about that situation in a positive way. So, there's more coherence and there's more purity in the way that we're thinking about it. So we can be very objective, step back from the situation, think about it through a different lens. Think about the situation. How can you handle it in a better way if you had that time again? And that's taking a very constructive approach with empathy, obviously.
Totally agree with you both. And it's all about how can you influence the situation. There are things you can influence and there are things you cannot influence. You cannot make it stop raining, but you can think in possibilities. What can you still do? And I think it's all about that with every situation, to think about, well, it's like my glass, is it half empty or is it half full? It's all about that, For me, my glass is half full. Cheers. We have another question coming in. Again from LinkedIn user, sorry I cannot see your name. How to deal with a team member who is always cribbing about things which he does not have? Yes, that's interesting. For me, I'm not that way, but I do know people who are that way, always thinking about what they don't have or what they're missing out, or someone else has a big car. I don't have that big car. For me, I don't care, right? And luckily, I think that way because I think that saves me from thinking in that way. And I think what you put out in energy in the universe, that's what you get back. So if you're always focusing on what you don't have, then your life will be like negative and you're always feeling like you're missing out. And if you're thinking about what you do have and express gratitude for that, you have your health, you have a house, you have food on the table, you have a job, you have healthy children, you have lovely animals that are always so happy when you come home. You are able to do fun things with your family. You're able to go on a holiday, right? There are so many things that you can still do. And like Ashok, when you were a kid and you had the situation with your legs and you couldn't play soccer, but what could you do? You could play with the girls, you could do all sorts of things, right? Still so much that you can do. And that's something I think to express to those people. Focus on what you do have, be grateful, practice gratitude every day, and that will help you to flip your mindset. And I've read that it also helps already within 2 weeks. If you practice that can help. So that would be my advice. Serena, Ashok, if you have anything to elaborate on that?
I'd just say to that team member, be grateful that you've got a job, number one.
Exactly, in this time, right?
Exactly. Number two, let go of that attachment. What is it that is causing you to feel the way you are? You know? And as you said, be grateful for what you have. So I think let's just have a bit of a reality check on who we are what we're trying to achieve. It's very important to have that time to just think about and just think about what we do have. There's so many people that go without.
Exactly.
There's always people that are worse off than us.
Yes.
So think about it from that perspective and show gratitude. Show gratitude from your heart. It must come from your heart, and that makes a difference. So forget about the attachment. Start focusing more about being in flow would be my recommendation to you.
That's beautiful, Rena. And I've traveled around the world quite a bit, and I have family living in India. And I live in southern Ontario, in Oakville, which is a very well-to-do town. And everyone has a new car, a new house, new clothing. And what I've noticed, and this might be unpopular to say, is that people who truly have to struggle and who don't have much, you do not hear them as often complaining about what they don't have. It's the people who do have who complain about what they don't have. So if you have a 3 Series Mercedes-Benz and somebody else gets a 7 Series, then you start cribbing, if you will, at that somebody else has a bigger, more expensive car. And I've noticed in my own self when I have plenty that I might look at somebody else who has more and have a moment of envy that person has this. And I check myself and I think, look at the things that I have love in my life. I have an amazing job and amazing people and amazing LinkedIn connections like you guys. And I think about the things that warm my heart, because contentment is in your heart. It's not the stuff you have. It's inside here. And if you don't, if you forget that, you're going to believe that the contentment is the toys that you have in your garage or the size of your car, these kind of things. Those are not the most important things that we have in a human life. The most important thing we have in a human life, to my point of view, is contentment and love, nourishing relationships, respect, and for me, a lot of that happens because of empathy. And so envy and jealousy are important points to talk about, but they tend to be erosive. They don't tend to be additive to ourselves as a person. I'll leave it there.
That's fantastic, Rina and Asha. Couldn't agree more. And I remember a quote, and I don't remember who it's from, sadly, but it said that when you are feeling that like you're missing out, look down, right? And then you see people who have much less than you. And when you want to achieve something, look up, right? Look up to people who are ahead of you and try to achieve that. And I think that's just a fantastic motto to live by. Now we have another question from Pramila Thapa. Hi Pramila, thank you for watching. She is asking, what are the best techniques to understand ourselves as well as others? Can I pass that question on to you, Ashok?
Well, I think self-understanding, and I think meditation also needs to be put in there as what that is. But self-understanding, from my experience, is understanding a number of things. One of them is your personality. And what personality is thresholds of reactivity. What are my preferences and what are my dislikes? And when we think about someone that we know, we'll actually describe them according to their personality, which is their likes and their dislikes. Are they easy to hang out with? Are they tolerant? Do they get frustrated easily? What kind of movies do they like? Do they like those movies? I like romantic comedies. My wife likes action movies, and so we get along well.
It's usually the other way around, I think.
It's usually the other way around, but it's all those girls in the playground that kind of they showed me the right way, right? That's where I got that from. So I think you start understanding yourself when you understand your personality. And what I do, and this is a little bit difficult sometimes for some people, is I ask people, what am I like to be in a relationship with? What's it like to be in a relationship with me? You might not like what you hear, but it sure gives you a good sense of understanding how other people experience us. And and imagine if that could happen in a workplace, and we could give a sense of helping people to be for it to be easier, and give people some instructions on how to be easier to get along with from the point of view of other people. Because a lot of people say, well, I'm great. I get along with everybody. Sometimes
Right.
they do, but sometimes they don't. So I think self-understanding also requires experiencing ourselves from other people's point of view. I'll leave it there.
That's well said, Ashok. And I think, and that's difficult for people to do, I guess, because it's basically asking for feedback about yourself, and you might not always like what you hear. But if you're giving someone feedback, you might mention things that you experience, which are maybe not always positive, but you can also package that in the things that you do like and experience as positive. So I like this and this. I think you're always doing this, and it really helps me. On the other hand, I also notice this and that doesn't help me because so and so, right? But that's not easy for everyone to do, and I think you need to be. You don't need to be afraid of that, but you have to have a certain amount of confidence, I believe, to do that, because you're receiving maybe critiques, and it mustn't like throw you off. You must be confident enough to say, okay, I may not do everything well, I may have some mistakes, I can improve on that and then move on. But I think that requires a certain strong attitude to be able to do that. Let me
And
see for the comments.
that, some organisations do 360s on people, and I think that's a really great way of understanding yourself, because you're getting constructive feedback.
That's well said, Rena. Now we have another question. At what stage of design we consider the empathy? Please explain. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Do any of you do?
Well, I think it's a fascinating question, because empathy to me is still misunderstood, and I often get into lots of complex conversations with people on LinkedIn who think I'm wrong. And I'm not going to name any names here today, but I think it's fascinating because it does make people uncomfortable. And when Rena was talking about the 360, quite frankly, I think people do want to know what people think of them. The only people who don't care about what people think of them are narcissists. And most people are not narcissists. They actually deeply care how they view and how they are viewed from other people. And when we're talking about future empathy again, if I can just drag it to that, isn't it comfortable to know where you stand with somebody, as opposed to not knowing where you stand with them? So when I'm interacting with someone, I'm asking them how they see me and how I see them. I'm looking forward in the future to have a better standing and a better understanding of each other and a more comfortable, content relationship with them. That's what drives me. I'm always trying to move it to that place where both of us are going to feel that we have a better understanding of each other. And this happens all the time, whether it's if you're playing in a rock band and you have to have musical empathy with each other, if you're dancing in a show and you're in the chorus line, you don't want your leg to be up there before somebody else's. We have to get that synchrony going. And it's about blending that together. So to me, the design of the empathy is to begin to connect to other people in that way of understanding.
Thank you, Ashok. In the meantime, we also have some comments coming in about depression. Someone is saying feeling depressed, and also that we have to manage it. I think if you are in that situation, that you need to ask for help, and maybe that person can send a message to you, Ashok. Maybe you can advise that person. Just commenting on that. And let's see if we have any other questions. Someone says, I know so many narcissistic people. Well, I would say stay away from them. And we have some book recommendations coming in from LinkedIn user. Maybe put your name in the chat, LinkedIn user, then I can mention your name. 100 Secrets of Being Happy. And I saw some other coming by as well. Creating Optimism, I think that's an interesting one. Let's see what else we have. I think that was about it. And Ramaisa is asking, so what is future empathy? Well, Ramaisa, I would suggest look back to the beginning of the show. If you missed that, then we talked about that. We started the show talking about usually when we are at a point in our lives when we look back, we know that everything, will be okay. We would say to our younger selves, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. You're going to accomplish this and this. You're going to get that job, that position, that relationship, and so on. And future empathy is basically flipping that to your future self and going ahead into the future with confidence, knowing yourself and your abilities, that it will be okay and that you can achieve your goals, even though you might not know what will be there on your path, what bears on the road, so to speak. Knowing you are strong enough to overcome that and that it will be okay. So that's future empathy, as I'm concerned. But Ashok, Rina, feel free to elaborate on that even more.
Well, for me, I think it's imagining the version of yourself you would like to become. And when Jim Carrey was a starving comedian, he wrote a check to himself for $1 million. And within 5 years, he was making $20 million. So I think if you can view yourself and the version that you would like to be in your future, even if you're in a very difficult time right now, but you can put that aside. You can really embrace that sense of yourself in the future and use the confidence of that person in the moment now to move towards to get to become that version in the future. Rina?
Absolutely. We talked about hope earlier, and I love Ashok's story about himself. But, from my perspective, upon reflection, this conversation today, and, Ashok was talking about having so much love and good health and things like that. For me, it's not really so much about results and actions anymore. It's more about happiness and fulfillment. So that, for me, is what future empathy is all about. Happiness and fulfillment, everyone.
That's well said, Rina and Ashok. Stacy is saying, thank you, all this is good. Well, thank you so much, Stacy. Appreciate your comments. And she says, love you first. And I think that's a perfect message to end the show with. Especially regarding to future empathy. Love yourself first and know that you're able to head on to the future with confidence in your own abilities. Ashok and Rina, I'd love your closing comments, your number one advice in future empathy for our audience. Ashok, you want to start?
Absolutely. For me, imagine who you want to become. We have no trouble asking a 7-year-old child, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's interesting, they have a great idea of what they want to be. Why not ask yourself that today? And then have the confidence, the love of self, and the happiness inside your soul to help you work towards that place instead of focusing on some of your past disappointments or past failures.
Thank you so much, Ashok.
Beautifully said, Ashok. And I just like to extend on that by saying, use fulfillment and happiness in your life to light the new pathway for the results that you want to achieve, not only for yourself, but for others through loving yourself.
Fantastic said, Ashok and Rina. And I would say, believe in yourself, believe in your abilities. And what always helps me, I always think when there's new things on my path and I look around me and I think if others can do it, I can do it too. So give yourself a break and embrace the future. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And we'll see you again in another 2 weeks. See you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.